Hello and welcome to another weekly digital strategy chat brought to you by Denver Data Web. We're a digital strategy company, so we help our clients overcome their unique challenges with a goals-focused approach to web development, web design, and digital marketing. My name is David Zonka. I'm a digital strategist here with Denver Data Web, and today I have with me Sarah.
I'm Sarah. I'm the digital marketing analyst at Denver Data Web.
Hey, thank you, Sarah, and thank you everybody that joins us today. We're going to be talking about user experience. So user experience, what is that? Well, it plays an essential role for just about every lead that comes into your website, every conversion, every sale generated online. People out there are probably wondering, what is that? What does that mean? How do you analyze your website's user experience? What components matter? What are we going to do with that? So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the different facets of user experience, why they're meaningful, and maybe how you can evaluate whether your website has good user experience, ways that you can improve that. So let's go a little bit more into exactly what user experience is, and we're going to talk about different facets of it. So let's break it down with kind of like a basic definition. So user experience, what? It's how a user interacts with and experiences a product or a system or service. We're going to be talking mostly about websites here, but web applications or apps can play into that. And user experience is sort of a person's perceptions of the utility of that system they're using, how easy it is to use, how efficient it can be to find the information a person needs or what they're trying to accomplish. Right? Sarah, have you ever encountered a website with poor user experience? That's never
Yes, I
happened,
have.
right? No, really? Oh, say it ain't so. Um, I don't know if we definitely want to talk about specific ones, but you don't want to call anybody out here. But yeah, I admit that too. Like I've seen a lot of websites in my day, and some of them have been pretty bad. Some have been great, and I'll in most cases it comes up to user experience, right? I feel like user experience is kind of a newer term when I talk about in the last maybe 10 years or so. I feel like before that we kind of just thought of in terms of usability and design. What is your take on that, Sarah? I feel like there's been kind of like an umbrella term that user experience has become.
Well, in the past 10 years, we've gone from using the internet as like a supplementary material to like we live on the internet, literally in
Mhm.
some ways. So having sites and applications that work really, really well and work the way they need to is more important than ever. So if we're literally doing like 90% of our shopping online and the checkout system just doesn't work, or we're double
Mhm.
paying, or we're not being charged properly, or it's taking the wrong address or something. And that's just one of billions of examples. But if it's just not working, then we're actually not, it seems like a big jump, but not living the way we're supposed to be living. So yeah, user experience is crucial, even more
We want to
so
live
than
our best life here on the web. We do. That's big. I think you hit the nail
ever.
on the head. So I feel like there's been this progression over time, and I'm just going to wax philosophical for a moment, but we're going to dive into some specifics. Initially it's, hey, we're on the internet. We're talking about like 20 plus 30, going on 30 years now, right? Like, hey, there's a page on here, great. And then people can start adding images and animated things and music and stuff. We're talking about GeoCities and MySpace and stuff, right? Kids back in the day, my MySpace page played music. Um, yeah, and at some point, companies, professional organizations are thinking about, how are we going to ensure that people want to go to our page, our website than others, right? It's, the web design is a big piece. It looks great, whatever, that sort of thing. Well, some along the way, there's interactivity that occurs, people trying to do things, accomplish things with the website. It's not just, a one-way experience. And so usability, becomes super important. That really matters. And I think at some point the gradual evolution and progression of that is, well, all these things matter. So I was like, well, usability is most important. No, the design is most important. Like they all matter and they're all part of an overall user experience because you want, somebody to feel like your design and brand is very compelling and impactful. You want them to be able to use your site and get the information they need out of it. You want them to perceive it to be valuable and that what you're doing is meaningful. Do you want them to be impressed? People don't stick around for more than a split second if they're not, right? So use your experience, this umbrella term. And well, I kind of just touched on a few aspects there. And I think that's what we're kind of dive into today is these different pieces of user experience and how they might be different, they all kind of what they add to this overall picture, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's kind of start. We got like a little list here. Let's kind of start from the top. So here's a good one to think about. If your website or application, I'm going to talk mainly from the standpoint of websites. Um, One aspect of determine if it is presenting a good user experience. Is it useful? Like, does it actually meet the demands of your users? Well, that should seem pretty like pretty much like a matter of course, right, Sarah? But is it?
Yeah, you take the time and effort to create a website or create a web page or an application. You want it to be useful. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Um, Along with that, there's also the element of it being valuable. So useful and valuable. You're creating an application or creating a website or paying someone to do those things. You want people who spend time on your site to actually get the value out of it and get the use out of it. And while they seem kind of like obvious, they should go without say, it is very, very important. So in doing that, you do want to make sure that um, the messaging behind it is very, very clear. If Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought again. I apologize. Um, let's use an example. So we always use a pizza example. We use a pizza example. So it's a nice pizza place. You want to have a really great, valuable page that talks about food and wine pairings. A page like that may lead to increased check averages, meaning that your page is valuable for both customers and your business. If the messaging on the page I apologize. I don't know why.
So if you're on a site and it's useful, we're thinking of in terms of, does it actually meet the demands of your users, right? So are your services, products, information, are they actually answering the questions that they have? So if you're trying to buy a product, like the pizza example, right? If you're trying to buy something, like you can see the information, you can find information about what it costs, what it does, how it's useful to you. From a value standpoint, it's more valuable if you can see the value, right? So if you can understand more about it and what it's going to do for you, yeah, I totally get that's valuable. And there's a lot of ways that you you can kind of evaluate your website in general if it's meeting that kind of criteria is of it being useful. So like a term we use a lot, like above the fold. We talk about design of websites. So is the product information, service information, is that available above the fold? Can you actually see it? Because a lot of people don't want to scroll down to actually get that information. So that's a good way to make your website more useful immediately. Your contact information. That's going to be something people are going to want to get to. Let's say, hey, yeah, I want to work with these guys. I want to buy a pizza. I want to do stuff. Like, do you have to hunt around to find it? Or is it right there? You don't want to make them work for something like that. Unless you don't want to be called, maybe you want a contact form, then maybe you use some strategies there to kind of guide people to contact form. But in general, can people find the information easily, right? I would say if people are doing those kinds of things with their websites, it's going to be a bit more useful, right, Sarah?
Yeah, and thank you, David, for picking that up for me. I had to step away from the computer for a second.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems, like I said, self-explanatory that the page should be useful and valuable, but where people often miss the mark is actually creating the page that does exactly what it's supposed to be doing and serves your customers or your visitors the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's think of another facet here. So usable. Like
Yeah.
this is a good one. I like the idea of this. So it just needs to actually work. I mean, in basic terms, right? I mean, that should be a fairly low bar to cross. But I imagine there's a lot of different ways that can get a little tricky. But usability, that's pretty important for user experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're looking at something like you want your site to do a specific thing, whether that's e-commerce or a custom application, and if you're going forward and just using like a DIY website or something like that, there's the possibility that the site is not working the way that you want it to. So having that page be usable and be usable in the direction of your goals is also very important.
So some ways that we can, some common ways maybe people, when they're putting together their website, or that they may not be really hitting the mark, right? So, are the pages easy to navigate and use? That's pretty baseline stuff here. Like, can you proceed through it? But I mean, we've seen, when we talked about web core vitals recently, and one of the things there is this idea that, are your websites shifting their layouts and structure a lot, or the pop-ups and things that are just interrupting the flow? Well, Google cares about that, because when a lot of that stuff is going on, it probably creates a very poor usability type of experience, and they don't want that. So yeah, is it easy to navigate and use? We talk about responsive mobile web design a lot, and Google certainly cares about that too. Here's a trend here. Things that create good usable experience, Google actually wants you to have, and kind of gives you a benefit to that, right, Sarah, and like SEO and things like that. So you should probably do it.
Absolutely, yeah. Web core vitals is very, very important.
So
And it has,
mobile responsive is fits into that, right? So that's it can be seen on different types of mobile devices, different sizes, and not have you go through too many hoops, right?
absolutely, yes.
Usability. So I mean, there's probably some kind of, you can get into some really granular stuff, like is the how big of the font size is, right? Readability.
Yeah, the font sizes, the readability of the page, is it understandable? Is it what is the word we used earlier that may work with this? Is it usable? Does it accomplish the goal it's supposed to for the page? All of those things wrap up into whether it's usable. Actually, everything we're talking about today wraps into that as well. Also, going back to web core vitals, does it load in a way where you're able to use it in a reasonable amount of time? Do the buttons and the keys go to the pages they're supposed to? So yeah, everything wraps up into whether the site is usable.
I guess there isn't always like a simple delineation between this realm of user experience and this one. I guess there's some overlap here and there, but the main thing is understanding why these things matter, why you should make some improvements in your website or not, or understand the kind of experience that it presents to your users, right?
Yeah.
Usability matters. All right, so how about findability? That's a good one. We think about that kind of thing a lot, don't we?
It's very much SEO related. It's a huge SEO component. Is your site findable on search engines, or is your social media page a bit findable? Are you using keywords and your business name in a way where people can find it easily? Is your business name catchy enough? Is it easy to remember? Also, if you're findable and you don't necessarily, if people aren't looking for those words, in that same respect, is it also a desirable page? So if your page is findable and you're building it in a way where people can find it, that's great. But if you're also doing it in a way where you can find it, but people aren't necessarily looking for it, well, is that page still desirable? So in one example, and I won't actually say which keyword it is, so that we don't invite a bunch of competition, but Denver Data Web has one keyword. We rank #1 for it across the country. And it's, on the surface, it sounds like a really, really great keyword to use. It is very, very findable. Our site is very findable with that keyword. However, I think it has like an average of 2 monthly searches for this keyword. So regardless of how great that keyword sounds and how relevant it sounds, it turns out it's not a very desirable keyword. So yes, it does add value to our site because we are ranking #1 for that word on a regular basis. But you do kind of have to have a give and take between being findable for the words that you want to, but then also being desirable using those keywords and those concepts that people actually want to look for.
And It sounds like there's kind of like multiple layers to like findability, right? So, you want your website to be found, and you also want people to find what they're looking for. So, I mean, if they're finding you with these keywords and then they end up on your website, they want to understand, the information they're looking for, or the piece of data that they're tracking down and you purportedly have based on what they saw in search results. So if, can people find that once they get there? Do they get the information do they need?
Oh, yep. If you're just blindly using keywords to get people to come to your page, and then once they're there, they can't find what they were looking for in the first place. Yeah, that also wraps into valuability.
Yeah,
Valuability.
I mean, it
Is
has
that a
no
word?
value if you can't find it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can find it, but when you get to the page, that keyword or that concept doesn't play out the way that the searcher wants it to,
Mhm.
that's a big part. And I'm sure I can think of an example of when that might happen. Don't have one yet, but I'll come up with one.
I think a lot about information architecture. It's like a field of this kind of stuff, information science and web development, all user experience that I've delved into a lot over my career. I really enjoy it. Information architecture in a nutshell, in layman's terms, is really just thinking about how you structure and create hierarchies around information, the way that it's put together in a system so that people can find or use that information. And when you think of like a website and how kind of design patterns have changed over the years and user experience, it's interesting to me because initially years ago there's kind of more this pattern where you have these very extensive navigation link lists on, let's say, the like on the left side or right side of a page, the sidebar, right? It's not as common at all used today, right? Um, you got mega menus, big navigation bars and super highly nested menu structures, the big fat footers at the bottom with the links, like recopying everything. And then, search based navigation, just search, find what you're looking for, pull it up. Faceted search, you can kind of search based on like a hybrid approach with like the navigation on the left, but you can kind of choose your adventure is what I always say is, like, oh, break it down. If you're on Best Buy looking for some kind of products, like products by IBM, computers by IBM, computers of certain cost range, by, faceted search. That's what I mean by that. You see it a lot on Amazon. So there's all these different patterns for information architecture and finding what information people are looking for over the years. And it all matters. It's, one of the things I get is, how are you making it so people can find what they're looking for? Because if they can't, well, they get frustrated pretty fast, and that's something we all do on a daily basis now. Find the answer you search for, on Google or Bing or wherever, and then you get to the website, and then you just hopefully this website's going to answer my question if it's not already answered by Google with their rich snippets right in the search results, their featured questions, and you get there. Having such a lengthy career in web development is something all web developers, programmers do is you search for something, an error code or how to do this, how to do that. And so much time is spent not getting the answer.
And I guess a very, very an example that's very extremely current right now is searching for vaccinations online. Everybody wants to get, well, not everyone, but most people, I would hope, want to be vaccinated at this point in time. So if you search that online and you're seeing an overwhelming amount of search results, and half the ones you go to don't give you that information that you need to. I want to be vaccinated. I want to make an appointment to be vaccinated. And when you get there, you're finding information about vaccinations, people's theories on vaccinations. You're finding all this different information, but actually finding what you're looking for
Mhm.
can sometimes be very frustrating. And I know that in a lot of my friends' cases, they have actually gone down that road and then given up. And I keep hearing about that quite a bit lately. So that's another thing where if you have a page and you are trying to rank for those terms, and you're not delivering on what those terms would suggest or what the content would suggest, that's a big, big piece of that.
Definitely. So what's next on user experience? Well, accessibility, trustworthiness. Accessibility, that's an area that I really like delving into. I think it matters a great deal. I mean, again, I kind of talked earlier about how, oh, this matters more than this. Usability is important, but web design, like all these things are important, and accessibility is super important. And it's just something that I like talking about because I feel very strongly that the web should be accessible. Like websites, it should be, accessibility means usable to all people, regardless of their circumstances, their things that may impede them, limitations or otherwise. And that's kind of at a high level, that's what that means. And I think, when all websites are like that, that's an ongoing goal. It increases the value of the internet and the World Wide Web overall. Kind of making that information and resources available to all those people out there. For some folks, let's say it's even more pointed during something like this pandemic, right? So some people need to do something like at the DMV, like update their registration or something, right? If there's mobility issues, it makes their life easier when they don't have to like try and get down there physically and do these things online. But if they do have limitations, whatever they might be, whether it's motor or visual or auditory or tactile or cognitive, you're helping them live their best lives, by making your website more accessible. And that's why it means a lot to me. And so
Yeah.
accessibility, how does that play out? So,
Well, unfortunately, well, actually, fortunately and unfortunately, we'll start with the unfortunately part first. These elements can often be the easiest to ignore. If your site is ranking well and it's accomplishing what it's supposed to,
mhm,
in some cases, and I wouldn't actually say this. This is an example. Who cares if the print is too small or if I don't use credible sources? It's doing what I want it to do. I'm making money from it, and that's not a great way to think. You do want to be accessible. You want to make sure that you're using those alt tags for people who aren't able to read it, or you are using, or who are unable to see it even. That you are also as far as trustworthiness, that you are citing your sources or that you're using credible sources. It's very, very important. And it's, while easy to ignore up until now, it's always been an important thing, the accessibility part of your website, and also making sure that you are a trustworthy website, not only with your systems and anytime you're taking information from your visitors, but also when you're displaying information or sharing information, that you are using credible information. And as we discussed a few weeks ago in our digital strategy chat on Core Web Vitals, these types of things are now going to wrap into your SEO. To what degree that happens, where we have still to find out, but especially the accessibility part of it, it's going to become a pretty significant part of your SEO in 2021. So if you have been able to ignore some of these things up until now, you may find that it is more important that you're making your site accessible and trustworthy, because it could affect your SEO. It could in a negative way if you are not.
mhm. There actually, there are some folks out there, companies, organizations, where they can't ignore, right? So if they're receiving federal funding, something like that, there are federal laws with accessibility, like Section 508, applying to accessibility standards as it applies to websites. A lot of that draws from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines out there. And, I think that's great that the government helps. I don't know if enforce is the right word. I'm not a lawyer, but to help ensure that accessibility is adhered to as much as possible. But then a lot of folks, if they're not interacting with the federal government at all in the United States, and we're talking about from the standpoint of laws in the United States, every country has their own laws for these sorts of things. But I'm speaking from my point of reference. Yeah, I mean, it may be possible to overlook that. But even if they can, my take on it, Sarah, I think we agree here, is that you know you're missing out on helping people, customers, you know, whether somebody has, physical or other limitations that makes it difficult to use a website. They need things. They need to know things. They're trying to do stuff in their life. And, if you just don't take any effort to make your website account for that, you're missing out on people you can help. They could be loyal customers or members of your organization or anything like that, right? And that's unfortunate. I think that's not a very wise strategy. And I think there's also this kind of misconception that's stuck around over the years that, to make a website that's impactful, it looks great, it has a great user experience, that, oh, well, these limitations for stuff for accessibility, it's not letting us design it the way we'd like. I don't think that's really a thing. I think that's more of a lazy attitude when it comes to user experience design, web design in general. I don't think people are really held back as they might suggest in that regard. Yeah, maybe it takes a little bit more expertise and creativity, thinking outside the box to make that happen. But that's why you want to work with experts anyway, right?
Yeah, totally. What was I going to say about that? So I think it was beginning of 2019 or end of 2018 also. And I guess my lead in for that is this is not the first time that Google has focused on these things as an SEO aspect or as an SEO consideration. The end of 2018 or beginning of 2019, there was a Google core update that affected medical websites in general. And so there were millions of medical websites across the country who if they weren't following those, and you think a medical website would be the first to follow accessibility and trustworthy considerations, but there were quite a few medical websites across the United States that did see a drop in SEO based on not following these guidelines. So the fact that Google has already focused on that, and I mean, it's weird to say that like Google has the final say in these things, but Google kind of does, especially since it's obviously the biggest search engine in the world. So the fact that they're moving those considerations to all websites right now it's amazing. It's great.
It sure is. I like that. So, kudos to you, Google, for using your bully power to try and create positive change. We just always hope that it is for positive change, right? So yes, user experience, it really matters. It's really a broad topic that encompasses a variety of things, whether it's usability, accessibility, desirability, findability. There's all those different pieces. And while it's always a work in progress, I think it goes without saying, but I will say it, you'll be well served if you pay appropriate attention and diligence to the user experience of your website application and make sure that it does serve the needs of your audience so they can better serve the needs of your business organization. So be sure to check out our website at denverdata.com. We have a lot of resources, guides, and information about user experience, web design, web development in general. So a lot of resources there to check out. You can always find us on social media at LinkedIn, Facebook. Find us there at Denver Data. And be sure to like and subscribe to these digital strategy chats on our YouTube channel. We have a new one every week, so that's every Friday, different topic. This one was a great one, and I'm sure in the future we're going to dive in a little more detail on different aspects of user experience that we covered today, and a little more into the nitty-gritty. So thank you for everybody tuning in. Until next time, have a great week. Thank you, Sarah.
Have a good weekend.